These are the most shocking and interesting vintage photos and the most unusual objects from the past. Let's take a look. This toppled statue at Stanford University was destroyed during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, one of the deadliest quakes in American history. A child is restrained in a specialized positioning device for an X-ray examination, a practice common in mid-20th century hospitals. In the 1950s, some buses were equipped with external racks, allowing baby carriages to be attached to the front during transit. This design offered mothers a way to travel with infants while saving interior space for passengers. Clay Allison, a notorious gunslinger of the Wild West, was feared for his erratic brutality, once digging a grave before a duel so the loser could be buried on the spot. He hanged a constable without cause, killed the man's avenger, and in a shocking display, stripped naked to dance over the corpse. These protective masks were designed for extreme cold conditions in the mid-20th century. From left to right, a World War II-era submariner's hood, a Russian motorcycle mask, and a U.S. Army Air Force's flight mask used during World War II. Dancer Gene Nelson leaps on a Nevada cliff in the early 1950s, captured against the backdrop of Frenchman's Flat. Behind him, the small cloud under his leg is not ordinary. It is the mushroom cloud from a nuclear test explosion about 40 miles away, which he called his atomic jitterbug. In the early 20th century, women used fingertip formers like these to shape and refine the ends of their fingers for aesthetic purposes. The small metal clamps were placed on each fingertip, reflecting a beauty trend of the era that emphasized delicate, well-formed hands. Henry Lovelace, jailed for murdering his wife, escaped by sawing through prison bars with a hidden blade. Decades later, his headless torso was found in a cave near Dubois, Idaho, with limbs discovered later, but his skull never recovered. This collection features antique planchettes, wooden boards used in 19th and early 20th century seances. Believed to channel messages from the dead, they became iconic tools of the spiritualism movement. This is a Draeger smoke mask from around 1903, an early form of respiratory protection used by firefighters. It featured a rubberized hood, glass viewing window, and a hose system designed to filter air in smoke-filled environments. This photograph shows members of the Brighton Swimming Club in England, founded in 1860 and one of the oldest sea swimming clubs in the world. The men pose in early striped bathing costumes and top hats, reflecting Victorian-era leisure culture. Hiru Onoda, an intelligence officer of the Imperial Japanese Army, hid in the Philippine jungle for nearly 30 years, convinced World War II had not ended. He finally surrendered in 1974 after his former commander personally ordered him to stand down, living until 2014. In 1959, Volkswagen offered an in-car coffee maker as an optional accessory. Mounted on the dashboard, it allowed drivers to brew fresh coffee on the go, reflecting the era's fascination with convenience gadgets. The 1986 Buick Riviera was one of the first production cars to feature a touchscreen interface. Its CRT-based graphic control center allowed drivers to manage climate, radio, and vehicle diagnostics decades before modern infotainment systems became standard. This birch bark drawing was created about 700 years ago by a 7-year-old boy named On Fim from Novgorod in present-day Russia. His sketches and writings. This is a miniature set of William Shakespeare's works, containing 111 tiny volumes. Such editions were popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries, crafted for collectors. New Yorkers gathered in Times Square in 1998 to watch the final episode of Seinfeld broadcast on a giant screen. The sitcom's finale drew nearly 76 million viewers nationwide, marking one of the most watched television events in U.S. history. In 1942, Edna Egbert climbed onto the ledge of her Brooklyn apartment building and threatened to jump. Police and neighbors tried to restrain her, while a rescue net was stretched below. A postal worker rides a 3-wheeled delivery bicycle through the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina, mid-20th century. The vehicle, marked Correos y Telecomunicaciones, was used to transport large volumes of mail across the city's busy avenues. The German airship Hindenburg soars over Berlin's Olympic Stadium during the 1936 Summer Games, a symbol of technological pride at the time. In 1940, Witold Pilecki, a member of the Polish resistance, deliberately allowed himself to be captured by the Nazis to infiltrate Auschwitz. He organized resistance inside the camp and secretly sent reports to the Allies, becoming one of the first to expose its atrocities. During the hyperinflation crisis in Germany in the early 1920s, paper money lost so much value that it was often burned for fuel. Families found banknotes cheaper and more practical to use as kindling than to spend on basic necessities. On March 24, 1958, Elvis Presley was drafted into the U.S. Army as a private at Fort Chaffee, drawing massive media attention. He served until 1960, later staging his famous comeback with a live NBC performance in 1968. On November 19, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address at the dedication of a Civil War cemetery in Pennsylvania. His brief but powerful speech redefined the meaning of the war, emphasizing liberty and equality as the nation's core ideals. A woman uses an early influenza mask during the global flu pandemic of 1918-1919. Such devices, often improvised or experimental, were part of public health efforts to combat one of the deadliest outbreaks in modern history. This brass mechanism is part of an old theodolite, a surveying instrument used to measure angles in engineering and mapping. It likely dates to the late 19th or early 20th century. In November 1982, Joseph Ambrose, a World War I veteran, attended the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. He held the folded American flag that had draped the coffin of his son, killed in the Korean War in 1951. In December 1899, Nikola Tesla was photographed in his Colorado Springs laboratory as his magnifying transmitter produced massive electrical discharges. Tesla held at least 278 patents worldwide and became one of history's most visionary yet often underappreciated inventors. In 1945, Allied experts inspected the ruins of Adolf Hitler's underground bunker in Berlin. As Soviet troops closed in, Hitler and his wife Eva Braun committed suicide, ending the Nazi regime's grip on Germany. Belgian refugees flee Brussels during World War I, their belongings loaded into a cart pulled by a dog. Such improvised transport reflected the desperation of civilians forced to abandon their homes amid the German invasion. In the 1960s, singer and activist Harry Belafonte shared a laugh with Martin Luther King Jr., reflecting their close friendship during the civil rights struggle. Belafonte, a global star, used his fame to support the movement while popularizing Caribbean music worldwide. An Australian corporal holds a koala while stationed in Cairo during World War I. Soldiers often adopted animals as mascots, bringing a sense of comfort and familiarity far from home. Fifth Avenue and 59th Street in New York City, at the turn of the 20th century. The scene captures elegant pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages before the dominance of automobiles. In 1911, a Wright glider crash-landed vertically at Kitty Hawk. Orville Wright climbed out while Alec Ogilvy and Wilbur Wright held the aircraft steady, the same year Orville set a flight record lasting nearly a decade. Loggers in California use a 28-foot saw to cut down a massive redwood tree. Such monumental logging efforts in the late 19th and early 20th centuries drastically reduced old-growth forests. In 1910, former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt became the first president to fly in an airplane, seated next to pilot Archibald Hoxsey. That same year, Hoxsey set a world altitude record of 11,474 feet. A priest conducts prayers over the victims of the Titanic disaster in April 1912, after the ship struck an iceberg on its maiden voyage. Of the 2,224 people on board, more than 1,500 lost their lives. The photograph of Theodore Roosevelt riding an elk is a 1912 photo montage created for the symbol of his party, the Progressive Bull Moose. In that year's election, Roosevelt came in second place with 27.4% of the vote, behind Woodrow Wilson. A French resident lights a cigar to Winston Churchill during his visit to liberated Cherbourg on June 10, 1944. The Prime Minister's trip coincided with the strengthening of the Allied positions after the Normandy landings. These antique puppets and automata were crafted with unsettling realism. The skeleton's mouth contains actual human teeth, while the devil figure is fitted with genuine animal horns. The first recorded car crash in the United States happened in Ohio in 1895. Ironically, the collision involved the only two automobiles in the entire state at the time. Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy share striking historical parallels. Both were elected exactly 100 years apart, had vice presidents named Johnson, and were assassinated on a Friday while sitting beside their wives. Mark Twain was born in 1835, the year Halley's Comet passed, and died in 1910, the day after its return, just as he had predicted. King Umberto I of Italy once met a restaurant owner who looked exactly like him and shared uncanny life details. Same birthday, birthplace, and wife's name. The very next day, both men died under mysterious circumstances. Violet Jessup, a nurse and ocean liner stewardess, survived the sinkings of the RMS Titanic in 1912 and the HMHS Britannic in 1916, as well as the collision of the RMS Olympic in 1911. Known as the Unsinkable Woman, she lived through three of the most infamous maritime disasters in history. George Tierney was the first worker to die during the construction of the Hoover Dam in 1922. 14 years later, in 1935, his son Patrick became the last fatality, marking a tragic bookend to the project. A boy from the Great Smoky Mountains, Sevier County, Tennessee, collects water from a spring around 1950. Scenes like this reflected the isolated, rural lifestyle in the Appalachian region before modern infrastructure reached many communities. American women welders during World War II. Thousands of women entered industrial jobs in shipyards and factories, filling roles left vacant by men serving in the military. King George VI rides a slide at an amusement park in the 1930s, captured in a rare informal moment before his reign during turbulent times. Young racers refuel their miniature sidecar motorcycles during a children's race in Lustgarten, Berlin, Germany, 1931. Women's Fire Brigade on a converted motorcycle in London, 1932. In 1972, astronaut Charles Duke left a photograph of his family on the lunar surface during the Apollo 16 mission. The photo, sealed in plastic, remains on the moon to this day, exposed to extreme temperatures and radiation. The Panama Canal, completed by the United States in 1914, used massive reinforced concrete locks to connect the Atlantic and Pacific. Construction faced disease, landslides, and immense engineering challenges. An officer demonstrates the death lottery, a controversial draft method where selected men were forcibly conscripted into military service. The system was criticized for its randomness and harshness during wartime. A makeshift fruit and oyster house stands in a war-torn landscape during the Civil War. Small businesses like this struggled to survive as battles devastated local economies. An abandoned Confederate camp during the Civil War. Despite obtaining a copy of General Lee's battle plans, Union General McClellan's hesitation allowed Confederate forces to retreat before the camp was captured. An abandoned truck in Chico, California, appeared empty when photographed, but after development, a ghostly woman's face was visible in the window. The photo was verified as genuine, leaving the identity of the Eerie passenger a mystery. The colossal statues of Ramses II at Abu Simbel were cut into blocks and reassembled in the 1960s to save them from flooding caused by the Aswan High Dam. This massive UNESCO project preserved one of Egypt's greatest ancient temples. In 1938, teacher Helen Hulick was sentenced to 5 days in jail for contempt of court after refusing to wear a dress while testifying at a burglary trial. Her defiance made her an early symbol of women's fight for the right to wear pants in public, In 1918, 12,500 officers, nurses, and soldiers at Camp Gordon in Georgia gathered to form a massive human eagle, symbolizing American strength during World War I. The carefully staged photograph became one of the most striking patriotic images of the era. The elephant's foot, a solidified mass of corium formed during the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, remains one of the most dangerous objects on Earth. When first discovered, standing near it for just minutes meant certain death from radiation exposure. In 1912, Jim Thorpe won 2 Olympic gold medals wearing mismatched shoes he found in the trash after his own were stolen. Despite his historic achievement as the first Native American to win gold for the U.S., the IOC later stripped him of his medals, a decision still contested today. In the 1930s, inventor George Jennings introduced his humanoid robot, Televox, designed to mimic basic human movements. Early robots like this were often showcased as curiosities, symbolizing both technological progress and public fascination with automation. A stage photo from 1931 in the United States depicts a young girl in bed, while a costume figure representing the boogeyman looms over her. Such images were part of themed photo sets reflecting cultural folklore and childhood fears. In 1916, a circus elephant known as Murderous Mary was publicly hanged in Irwin, Tennessee, after killing her trainer. The execution, witnessed by a large crowd, reflected both the mistreatment of circus animals and the brutal methods of punishment used at the time. This eerie scene is a promotional still from Hexen, Witchcraft Through the Ages, 1922, a Swedish-Danish silent film. Blending documentary and dramatization, the film explored medieval superstition, witch hunts, and the history of demonology. In 1982, students wore identical masks during the filming of Pink Floyd, The Wall. The masks symbolized the dehumanizing effects of the education system, a central theme of the rock opera. In 2000, a couple married on Miyakojima Island, Japan, while wearing gas masks due to toxic volcanic gases. Earlier that year, most of the island's 3,600 residents had been forced to evacuate because of the dangerous air. A young couple wears gas masks while walking together in 1970, highlighting growing concerns about smog and environmental pollution during that decade. A French soldier feeds his kitten from a can during the Indochina conflict, 1956. A sumo wrestling match in Yokohama, Japan, 1887. The photo captures wrestlers at the start of the bout under a canopy, with spectators gathered closely around the ring. American UH-1 Huey helicopters. Fire machine guns at the tree line while covering the advance of South Vietnamese troops. Vietnam, 1965. The image captures the intensity of air-ground coordination during the war. George Harrison of the Beatles takes a selfie with a fisheye lens in front of the Taj Mahal, India, 1966. The visit reflected the band's growing interest in Indian culture and spirituality. Photographers and police snipers lie side by side on a rooftop opposite Creditbanken during the Norrmalmstorg robbery in Stockholm, Sweden, 1973. The 6-day standoff led to the coining of the term Stockholm Syndrome. Adolf Hitler speaks in the Reichstag on September 1, 1939, announcing the start of a military campaign against Poland. This speech became one of the key events that started the Second World War. A British soldier smiles and shows a V sign, a symbol of victory, to prisoners of war after the Battle of El Alamein, Egypt, on October 26, 1942. This battle was a turning point in the North African campaign. At the end of an 8-hour shift, miners at the Zhdanovskaya coal mine light up used cigarettes, and all this for $30 per month. Donbass, Ukraine. Lyndon B. Johnson emotionally addresses the pilots, demanding that the engines be turned off so that John F. Johnson can. Kennedy could have started a speech. Kennedy is trying to calm him down at this moment. The photo was taken during the 1960 presidential campaign. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev found himself in an unusual situation in 1991. While in orbit, He witnessed the collapse of the Soviet Union and was forced to stay in space longer than planned. On June 28, 1998, during the WWE Hell in a Cell match, Mick Foley suddenly fell through the roof of the cage into the ring from a height of about 5 meters. In the photo, The Undertaker watches from above while the referees and medical staff check Foley's condition. An employee of the EMI pressing plant in London checks the quality of vinyl records of the Rubber Soul album by the Beatles, 1965. Each copy was listened to selectively to ensure that there were no defects before mass distribution. Former U.S. President Ronald Reagan waves a baseball cap, showing a partially shaved head after a medical procedure. In the background, his wife Nancy supports him. Battalion Courier during the First World War, May 1915. The photo shows the moment of delivery of the report on the front line. Walt Disney surrounded by the original cast of the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955. This show became one of the company's first big television projects and brought popularity to many young participants. An assembler poses next to a scale model of the first Soviet atomic bomb, created in 1949. This project marked the beginning of nuclear parity between the USSR and the USA during the Cold War. German troops march in front of the monument in Verdun, erected in memory of the French victory in the First World War. The picture was taken in 1940 during the occupation of France. The girl poses next to the car. Her reflection is clearly visible on the polished side of the car. Similar pictures in the style of Cars and Girls were popular in the early 1940s. A young man and a girl in fancy clothes share a bag of popcorn at the cinema. In the evening, the facade lights create an atmosphere of the 1950s. This picture captures the spirit of teenage dating from that era. The photo shows a young Winona Ryder surrounded by press photographers during an event in the late 1980s. This moment is often associated with her appearance in Hollywood when her famous relationship with Johnny Depp began. A rare shot of a fan taking a spontaneous selfie with Elvis Presley surrounded by fans. Such photographs from the 1960s became unique evidence of the singer's popularity and the emerging culture of snapshots. An installation at the Bronx Zoo in the 1960s, labeled "The Most Dangerous Animal in the World," used a mirror to reflect visitors' own image. The exhibit emphasized humanity's unique ability to cause mass destruction and threaten all life on Earth. In 1918, a Senegalese soldier in Paris used newly fitted prosthetic arms to write a letter under the guidance of a nurse. He was part of a rehabilitation program for wounded veterans after World War I. In the 1960s, civil rights activists in Ohio protested against a segregated swimming pool, holding signs that highlighted the injustice of racial separation. Their demonstration symbolized the fight for equality in everyday public spaces. Queen Genepil, the last queen consort of Mongolia, in ceremonial dress. She symbolizes the end of the country's royal dynasty in the 1930s. Joaquin Phoenix working in a restaurant kitchen, 1996. The actor, later known for his acclaimed film roles, is seen here in an early candid moment long before global fame. American World War I veterans gathered for a reunion in 1978, wearing their original uniforms and decorations, decades after the conflict had ended. An East German border guard throws a ball to a child on the western side of the Berlin Wall in 1962. The image reflects the brief moments of humanity amid one of the most tense divisions of the Cold War. A man rests with his cat at a bar in Craigville, Minnesota, 1937. The image, taken during the Great Depression, captures both hardship and the small comforts people held on to. Crowds celebrate inside a bar as Prohibition ends in the United States, 1933. The repeal of the 18th Amendment marked the return of legal alcohol sales after 13 years of nationwide ban. Inuit man warms the feet of his wife during an expedition in Greenland, 1890s. The image was taken by Arctic explorer Robert E. Peary, documenting traditional survival practices in extreme cold. Dozens of massive concrete busts of former U.S. presidents lie abandoned in a field in Virginia. Originally part of a failed theme park called President's Park, They were moved here after the park closed in 2010. A giant Star Wars poster lights up the streets of Tokyo in 1978. The premiere of the film in Japan was accompanied by large-scale advertising, which emphasized its cult status in the first years after its release. A worker applies a fresh coat of paint to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, 1956. Such work was carried out regularly to protect the structure from corrosion and preserve its iconic appearance. A young man takes a break while repairing a car in Brooklyn, 1950s. The scene reflects the spirit of post-war America, when cars became a symbol of independence and street culture. The circular cutting in the jungle is the result of the use of the BLU-82 aerial bomb, known as the Daisy Cutter. It was used in the Vietnam War to quickly clear helicopter landing sites. An Orthodox priest in traditional deerskin clothes poses with a rifle next to a dried fish. Russia, 1901. Every day, at the end of their shift, the miners had to go through an X-ray machine for inspection. Some miners swallowed diamonds or even hid them in makeshift incisions on their legs. South Africa, 1954. A newly painted M4 Sherman tank in a tunnel with infrared lamps, which reduces the drying time of paint from 24 hours to 4 minutes. Workers are building a sewer tunnel in Chicago in 1912. Metal segments and temporary scaffolding were used to strengthen the walls, allowing work on several levels at the same time. A British soldier takes a bath in a destroyed building in Tobruk, Libya, on February 17, 1942. Despite the fighting and devastation, the soldiers found moments for basic living and relaxation. Swedish pilots and technicians refuel a Saab 105 combat training aircraft right at a regular gas station, 1980. This scene demonstrates practical preparation for operations in conditions where military airfields may be inaccessible. A man on the New York subway reads an issue of the New York Post newspaper about the stock market crash on October 19, 1987. On that day, the Dow Jones Index lost more than 22%, which was the largest one-day drop in the history of the U.S. stock market. A group of Welsh miners are relaxing in a pub after a hard shift underground. Their faces and clothes are covered with coal dust, but they have beer mugs in their hands and smiles are noticeable. The picture was taken around 1912, during the heyday of the coal industry in Wales. The seized weapons related to the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln and the attack on his companion, Major Henry Rathbone, include revolvers, knives, and personal belongings of the conspirators. Among the exhibits are a shoe belonging to John Booth and a bullet extracted from Lincoln's head. The leaders of Great Britain, France, Germany, and Italy met in Munich on September 29, 1938, to discuss the fate of Czechoslovakia. The negotiations ended with the signing of the Munich Agreement, which allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland. Albert Einstein gives a lecture on the theory of relativity in 1922. His formulas and diagrams on the blackboard attracted the attention of scientists and students gathered in a crowded hall. This moment is captured as a symbol of the scientific revolution of the early 20th century. A Red Army women's unit poses with rifles during the Russian Civil War, 1919. Women volunteered to join the ranks, defending the revolution on an equal basis with men. Police checked the length of women's swimsuits on Venice Beach, California, 1929. Such inspections were carried out to comply with the laws on standards of decency, which strictly limited the style and length of beachwear. This image reflects the cultural constraints of the era before the advent of the modern notion of fashion freedom. A father and son serving in the same German regiment read letters from their wives and mothers at the front, 1915. Such pictures emphasize the family ties that persisted even during the First World War, when generations went to war together. Queen Victoria is pictured at Balmoral Castle in 1896 with Russian Emperor Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra Fyodorovna, and their daughter Olga. Albert Edward, heir to the British throne, stands on the right, uniting the two great dynasties of Europe in the photo. Rosa Parks, a symbol of the struggle for civil rights, is depicted in her place at the front of the bus after the abolition of segregation in 1965. Her quiet protest in Montgomery became the spark that changed America forever. Navajo horsemen moved through Canyon de Chelly in Arizona, one of the sacred sites of the tribe. The 1904 photograph by Edward S. Curtis has become one of the most recognizable photographs of the indigenous peoples of America. A teacher uses a traditional method of discipline in a lesson in Menomonee, Wisconsin, 1905. At the beginning of the 20th century, such practices were considered a common part of the school system. The signing of the Act of Surrender on May 4, 1945, was an important milestone in the end of the Second World War in Europe. In the presence of the Allied command, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery accepted the surrender of German troops in the Netherlands, northwestern Germany, and Denmark. This decision paved the way for the complete surrender of the Third Reich, which followed a few days later. In 1963, 16-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger took to the stage of his first bodybuilding competition, demonstrating the initial results of training. Even then, his confident posture and charisma set him apart from the participants. This moment was the beginning of the path that would lead him to worldwide success in sports and cinema. In Dessau in 1945, a woman posing as a refugee was exposed as being associated with the occupation authorities. Her identity was checked in the presence of local residents and former prisoners. This moment shows the atmosphere of post-war Germany and the process of identifying people loyal to the regime. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Gilbert Surgical Amphitheater was a place where medical students observed operations and studied the practice of surgery. The 1910 photo shows a full hall of students and medical staff preparing for a demonstration. This training format was a key stage in the development of modern medicine. At the inauguration of Theodore Roosevelt on March 4, 1905, Secret Service agents demonstrated such a prominent presidential escort for the first time. Their task was to ensure the safety of the carriage against the background of a large crowd of people and celebrations in Washington. The scene reflects the beginning of a new era of enhanced protection of the head of state in the United States. In 1943, the Allies conducted Operation Minced Meat, during which a body disguised as a British officer was provided with forged documents about invasion plans. These materials reached the German command, convincing it to expect an attack in Greece and Sardinia, and not in Sicily. The maneuver allowed the Allies to successfully land in Sicily, and became an important strategic ploy of the war. This photograph from the beginning of the 20th century shows the difficult working conditions of women employed in the match industry. A young mother, exhausted from hours of work, is leaning over a table next to boxes of matches, and her child is sleeping on the floor. The picture became a symbol of the industrial era and the social problems of that time. This rare photograph from 1904 shows a woman in a costume remarkably similar to the future image of Batgirl. She appeared decades before the official debut of Batman in 1939 and Batgirl in 1961. This photograph captures an unknown African-American settler family on the American prairies in the 1880s. Such families played an important role in the development of the West after the Civil War, facing harsh conditions and discrimination. A photograph from the early 20th century captured a female Freemason sitting on a scaffolding high above Berlin, circa 1910. The photograph symbolizes the rare participation of women in Masonic societies of that time, and at the same time demonstrates the large-scale urbanization of the German capital. The rare portrait of Robert Collett, 1842-1913, a Norwegian zoologist known for his research on ornithology, was taken around 1910. The image of the Birdman reflects the Victorian tradition of combining science with the artistic staging. A Victorian-era traveling couple poses for a portrait, dressed in stylish clothing of the time. The man holds a violin, suggesting a life tied to music and performance, while the woman carries flowers. Estimated date, 1890s. A group of elegantly dressed men and women sits on a fallen tree, captured in a strikingly artistic composition. Known as The Thrushes, the photograph was taken by Louis Milton Thiers in 1910. In the evening of 1938, the manager of the Piccadilly Circus Hotel in London leans over to a small dachshund, as if having a conversation with her. The atmosphere of the city at night and the streetlights give the scene a cinematic expressiveness. London, circa 1880. A mother and daughter watch as a steam tug steers a large sailing vessel along the Thames. This image reflects the moment of transition from the age of sails to the industrial era. Alice Doherty, known as the Woolly Girl from Minnesota, suffered from the rare disease hypertrichosis, which causes excessive hair growth on her face and body. Here she is depicted with her family in a strict Victorian portrait of the early 1900s. A fashionable portrait from the 1890s depicted a Victorian girl with unusually long hair, which was considered a sign of beauty and health in that era. Such photographs were often used as advertising or demonstration images. The profile of the actress Ava Gardner, filled out for the film studio in 1941. These documents were part of a standard set of papers that were required in Hollywood to work in the film industry. In 1963, the Mansfield News Journal published an article about the future, which predicted that phones would become so compact that they could be carried in a pocket. It seemed like a distant fantasy at the time, but after a few decades, the forecast came true. The article also mentioned prototypes of visual phones, which resembles modern video calls. During the Blitz, special animal ambulances appeared in London. Volunteers and organizations rescued pets from destroyed homes, transported them to safe places, and provided medical care. These services became a rare but important manifestation of animal care during the war years. Betty Lou Oliver went down in history as a Wonder Woman. In 1945, she survived a fall from the 75th floor in the elevator of the Empire State Building, setting a world record for survival from the highest altitude. This case is still considered one of the most incredible rescues of the 20th century. Louis Vuitton luxury tea case from the 1920s, designed for high society travelers. Inside is a complete tea set, tableware, tea, and sugar jars, as well as miniature accessories. Such sets emphasize the owner's status and convenience, even on the road. The first recorded photograph of a tornado was taken by A. Adams in Kansas in 1884. This image is considered a unique historical evidence, as it documented a natural phenomenon long before the advent of modern surveillance technologies. Frederick Douglass, one of the most influential abolitionists in the United States, became the most photographed man of the 19th century. He deliberately used portraits as a tool of struggle to show the strength and dignity of African Americans in an era when they were denied their rights. The wedding dress of Queen Sophia Magdalena, created around 1766, impresses with the scale and richness of the fabric. It is made of brocade with a gold pattern and is now kept in the Royal Armoury in Stockholm. A magnificent 19th century European hearse with carved figures and massive details served as a symbol of the status and grandeur of the last journey. Such carriages were used for notable people and were distinguished by their striking artistic workmanship. In England and Wales since 1696 and in Scotland since 1748, there was a window tax. Many homeowners bricked up their windows to pay less, which gave the city its characteristic gloomy appearance. During the First World War, military pipers were the first to rise from the trenches, playing bagpipes and raising the morale of soldiers. Despite the deadly risk, their music has become a symbol of the bravery and solidarity of the Scottish and Canadian units. President George W. Bush, on the presidential plane, Air Force One, shortly after the events of September 11, 2001. This rare frame captures the tense moment when the first key decisions were being made about the actions of the United States in an unprecedented crisis. French soldiers lit a bonfire inside a ruined church near Saint-Mihiel in 1916. In the silence between battles, they rest, talk, and keep warm among the traces of the war that have turned the holy place into a shelter. Aerial view shows more than 100,000 German prisoners of war in a makeshift camp on the Western Front. May 1945. The picture was published in Life magazine and became one of the largest evidences of mass surrender in Europe.